To remove and install the lower control arm on your Patriot Boost Indy VR1 snowmobile, follow these steps. Ensure the snowmobile is on a flat, level surface. Then, safely elevate the snowmobile. Reference your owner's manual for proper lifting techniques. Next, remove the sway bar link fastener and discard the nut. Then, remove the lower shock fastener and discard the nut. Continue by counter-holding the lower control arm spherical bearing and remove the fastener, nut, and washers. Discard the nut. Then, carefully separate the spherical bearing from the spindle. Next, remove the frontmost pivot fastener and nut. Discard the nut. Then, remove and discard the flange nuts securing the pivot shafts to the sled and pivot the lower control arm assembly off of the sled. Before continuing, clean the control arm with a clean shop rag. Inspect the control arm for wear or damage and replace if necessary. If reusing, inspect the pivot shafts for wear or damage and replace if necessary. Also, inspect the spherical bearing for wear or damage and replace if necessary. Next, align the control arm assembly with the mounts on the sled and reinstall the assembly. Then, install 3 new flange nuts onto the pivot studs. Also, loosely install the pivot fastener into the frontmost mounting hole on the right side of the sled and secure with a new nut. Continue by aligning the spherical bearing with the spindle. Reinstall the retained fastener and washer with the dome side down from the underside of the bearing. Then, secure the bearing with the retained washer with the dome side down and a new flange nut. Before continuing, inspect the shock bushing as well as the sway bar link bushing for wear or damage and replace if necessary. Then, align the shock mounting holes and reinstall the retained fastener from the rear and secure with a new nut. Continue by aligning the sway bar link with the mounting hole in the control arm. Then, reinstall the retained fastener from the left side of the sled and secure with a new nut. Next, torque the lower control arm flange nuts to specification. Then, torque the arm pivot fastener to specification. Next, torque the spherical bearing nut to specification. Continue by torquing the shock fastener to specification. Then torque the sway bar link fastener to specification. Finally, lower the vehicle completely. For more information, see your authorized Polaris dealer or visit Polaris.com.